glow of faint embers of hope, but only to discover, as I had many times before, that there are few expressions in the English language that are less attractive to women than rare book dealer. So the months slipped by in a cascade of disappointments, and the day of my return to Brooklyn was almost at hand when I went to the last of my social engagements of the season, the wedding reception of a cousin's daughter. I had just entered the venue, a stuffy colonial-era club, when I was accosted by a distant relative, Kanai Dutt. I had not seen Kanai in many years, which was not entirely a matter of regret for me. He had always been a glib, vain, precocious know-it-all who relied on his quick tongue and good looks to charm women and get ahead in the world. He lived mainly in New Delhi and had thrived in the hothouse atmosphere of that city, establishing himself as a darling of the media. It was by no means uncommon to turn on the television and find him yelling his head off on a talk show. He knew everyone, as they say, and was often written about in magazines, newspapers, and even books. The thing that most irritated me about Kanai was that he always found a way of tripping me up. But this occasion was no exception. He began by throwing me a curveball in the shape of my childhood nickname, Dinu, which I had long since abandoned in favor of the more American-sounding Dean. "Tell me, Dinu," he said, after a cursory handshake, "is it true that you've set yourself up as an expert on Bengali folklore?" The almost audible sneer rattled me. "Well," I spluttered, "I did some research on that kind of thing a long time ago, but I gave it up when I left academia and became a book dealer." "But you did get a PhD, didn't you?" he said, with barely concealed derision. "So you are technically an expert." "I would hardly call myself that," he cut me short without apology. "So tell me then, Mr. Expert," he said, "have you heard of a figure called Bondu ki Shodagar?" He had clearly been intending to surprise me, and he succeeded. The name Bondu ki Shodagar, gun merchant, was so new to me that I was tempted to think that Kanai had made it up. "What do you mean by figure?" I asked. "You mean some kind of folk hero?" "Yes, like Dukhin Ray or Chand Shodagar." He went on to name a few other well-known characters from Bengali folklore, Satyapir, Lokhinder, and the like. Such figures are not quite gods, and nor are they merely saintly mortals. Like the shifting mudflats of the Bengal Delta, they arise at the conjuncture of many currents. Sometimes shrines are built to preserve their memory, and almost always their names are associated with a legend. And since Bengal is a maritime land, seafaring is often a prominent feature of such tales. The most famous of these stories is the legend of a merchant called Chand Shodagar, who is said to have fled overseas in order to escape the persecution of Manasa Devi, the goddess who rules over snakes and all other poisonous creatures. There was a time in my childhood when the merchant Chand and his nemesis Manasa Devi were as much a part of my dream world as Batman and Superman would become after I had learnt English and started to read comic books. Back then, there was no television in India, and the only way to entertain children was to tell them stories. And if the storytellers happened to be Bengali, sooner or later they were sure to circle back to the tale of the merchant and the goddess who wanted him as her devotee. The story's appeal is, I suppose, not unlike that of the Odyssey, with a resourceful human protagonist being pitted against vastly more powerful forces, earthly and divine. But the legend of the merchant Chand differs from the Greek epic in that it does not end with the hero being restored to his family and patrimony. The merchant's son, Lokhinder, is killed by a cobra on the night of his wedding, and it is the boy's virtuous bride, Behula, who reclaims his soul from the underworld and brings the struggle between the merchant and Manasa Devi to a fragile resolution. I don't remember when I first heard the story or who told it to me.